I think we've known for a long time that our schools are underperforming. So we didn't go there. We take that as our starting point. But the two really important questions are, first of all, why is this happening? What is the actual problem? And then only from there can we derive solutions. So we ended up with a raft of recommendations for trying to improve the system. But I think it's important, first of all, to discuss the diagnosis. Where does this problem arise from? And we posed ourselves the question, is it because teachers won't work? Are they lazy, indisciplined, and just supported by their union to do nothing? And I think it's a perception of a large number of South Africans that that is in fact the case. Or alternatively, is it that teachers can't teach? With the best will in the world, they can't teach. Now, our analysis is that, yes, to some extent, the won't question does arise. We think in about 30% of schools, time is really poorly managed. And that goes back to poor management, to poor principals who can't motivate, principals who can't discipline, principals who can't lead. And that in turn is related to the district levels. In fact, a lot of people are calling for inspectors to be brought back to hold schools accountable. Well, in fact, the inspectors are there. They're called circuit managers. Their job is to hold schools accountable in the first instance for good time management practices. Now, before we go into the wrongs, let's just say up front that in 70% of schools, principals are doing their jobs. Circuit managers are doing their jobs. And most schools in this country are relatively well managed. But it's that 30%. It's not a huge proportion, but it's far too many. And that does have to be fixed. I think in about 75, maybe 80% of our schools, the problem is poor teacher knowledge. So teachers, in fact, in the large majority of teachers we saw in these 133 schools, and we were looking at the first 3 grades, remember, the large majority of teachers are desperate to do better. They're working their hardest, but they don't have the knowledge resources to teach better. Well, we quote figures from a national test exercise that was done on grade 6 teachers in maths and language. And these tests revealed that teachers' subject knowledge of language and mathematics is very poor. And that's where the problem stems. Well, you see, let's take the language test.
Yeah.
And that's what we really focused on, literacy, reading and writing. These language tests were quite extensive. They were comprehension tests based on 11 different texts, ranging from very easy texts to quite difficult ones with complex technical language. And the conclusion there is that a representative sample of South African grade 6 teachers do relatively well on questions that require just straight recall. Like, you get a story about John Jabu and his dog. What was the boy's name? Jabu. That's a straight recall type question. But as soon as it gets into inferential reasoning, interpretive questions, evaluative questions, teachers start to score well below 50%. So those are the skills that teachers are not familiar with. Now, if you can't do inferential reasoning yourself, how can you teach it to your kids? Well, it goes back to their own education, Kolani. And it's not just their training. It goes back to their schooling. These things you're supposed to get in the primary school and then build on them from there. So, if you don't understand the function of inferential reasoning yourself, then you're not going to be able to teach it to your children. In fact, you don't really understand the demands of the curriculum yourself. So we observed 2 grade 2 reading lessons in each of these 133 schools that we went to. And we found that teachers are taking their children to a fairly low level of text decoding. So they sort of recognize, their children can recognize most of the words in a simple text. But they're not reading fast enough to go deeper into comprehension. And even those who are reading relatively fluently, their teachers are not challenging them to go into the inferential type questions, the higher cognitive functions. So, and the teachers will be content to have their kids read 3 or 4 little 6 or 8 page reading books a year. And then, the box is ticked, their kids can read. But actually they don't seem to understand that children should be reading 1 or 2 of those books a week. So they should read 30 to 50 books a year of different kinds. You know, fiction. They should be reading non-fiction. Books about dinosaurs, books about the earth. They should be discussing these in terms of higher cognitive functions. They should be writing expressive pieces. They should be writing analytical pieces at least once a week. So we looked at children's writing as well, and we found, you know, extended writing, what we call extended writing, consisting of a paragraph or longer. That's where you start thinking. That's where you start putting together thoughts in a consequential pattern, where you start expressing yourself, where you start describing things. These kinds of writings are very seldom done. So, you know, kids are at this very low level. Teachers are not taking them up to higher levels of evaluation and comprehension. They don't understand what the demands of the curriculum are. In fact, you know, one of the things we ask the school managers, now we'll come back to the school managers because they're really important. The principals, the deputy principals, and the heads of department. We ask the heads of department, now, do you monitor what your teachers are doing? Because that's one of their functions, is to try and see what their teachers are doing, and where there are problems, they should help their teachers. Do you monitor what teachers are doing? Yes, and we ask them how they do that. Well, they look at the children's books, they look at the curriculum, they look at the teachers' plans, and make sure all of these things are aligned. They say they're making sure that the teachers are teaching according to the curriculum. And they'll fill in instruments, and they'll put them in files, and they'll show you shelves of files of paper where they've monitored the teachers. But you go and look at those children's books. They're not doing what the curriculum says they should be doing. You see, so the school managers themselves don't understand the demands of the curriculum.